Morning, everyone. Start about 10 minutes or so. I thought, while we're sitting here, might as well have a chat. How are you guys enjoying the new format around Ignite and our events? As a show of hands, good? Bad? Anyone awake? So if the bad, is it the walking between all the rooms? Too crowded. Yeah, they've been busy. So doing like a 300 or 400 and it's like a 200. Okay. So I work in the team that interfaces between our audience and our engineering team. So it's always good to get feedback. And in the last few days, informally, I've been chatting to people on the train, on the bus, at the parties, to get feedback and understand. I mean, it's always very hard to please everyone, but I think we're trying to please everyone. The one thing we kind of really trying to ask people is fill out your eval forms and give us feedback, honest feedback. Because we get a lot of emails. When they find out who you are, get a tweet or an email saying, hey man, this session wasn't so great, that one was good. But if it doesn't go into the eval system, we don't pick it up. It doesn't go into our central guys who manage our eventing and content. So normally the last slide is please fill out your evals. The last slide comes up and you guys are like down the escalators already. Because you get that last slide, I'm out of here for the next session. So it's good to, and I'm going to keep chatting to people for the next few days, but it's good to hear feedback. But I honestly recommend you to use the feedback on the evals. It's the best way for us to get information. Excuse me. It's also a good way for us to rate content for people and for speakers. Because obviously we work on a grading system, and we have pretty high expectations of our speakers to meet the level of what they're going to do, especially the level of content. Anything else? Come on, don't give me service pack issues or XP issues, but anything else. Go. Other good point, maybe good points. Good to have everything together. So MMS, SharePoint, Office, TechEd, or have you found that being a bit of a distractor? Not sure which ones to go to, as in sessions? Yeah. Oh, you mean from a content or abstract perspective? Okay. And operations purely like infrastructure, so system center, server, virtualization. Okay. Yeah, I think we've taken a lot of honest feedback to make changes, and that's the kind of stuff we would like to hear more about, because obviously then maybe it's worthwhile us modifying the abstracts to be more relevant to what the topic should be about, or being more searchable in the app or on the website around what your piece is. So not just virtualization, maybe it's Hyper-V and system center, maybe get a bit more granular. Welcome. I hope you. Nice. Right. Go for it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That is actually one of the biggest things we've taken back this week. If you're not in a good Wi-Fi area here, you'll struggle if you're not on 3 or 4G. I mean, I'm on 2G mostly because I come from Africa and we're not, it's a little bit different here for cell service. But that's good feedback. And again, please, if you can put that into any sort of eval, it honestly goes into a real engine. It really does. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, good old data. Always need that. WhatsApp didn't work the first day, so I really struggled. I don't know if anyone else uses WhatsApp. We have 5 minutes and we can kick it off. Morning. Is there anyone who comes to these events and attends sessions not in their area? So you come and you go, I want to see everything else, not what I specialize in, because you kind of normally know that. Okay. Yeah, we've been trying hard. I say the last Tech in North America, we started doing that by recommending people to go into different streams. If you are a collaboration person, go and have a look at virtualization, because possibly your infrastructure is going to sit on top of that. So maybe you understand what's below it. Or vice versa, a lot of infrastructure guys, go and see what the collaboration guys are doing around their architecture or their design principles. So yeah, we've been pushing that since Tech in North America and Barcelona. We did that for Tech in Europe. So it's always good to get people's feedback around this, because normally you sit in your channel and you do the same old stuff and move on. But our platform is really changing. We're doing this with our platform around virtualization, the collaboration tools on top, the CRM piece next to it. So it's really good if you're in an architecture side to see how to architect. Maybe you don't support it, but it might sit on your platform. Okay, so a couple do attend, so that's good. Andy. We have 2 minutes and we'll get going. I'll start in 2 minutes, yeah. Cool, thanks. Hey, Judy. How's it going? Good, thank you. Perfect. Cool. Yeah, all good. Yeah, ready to go? 100%. Thanks very much. See you later. All right, cool. Let's get cracking. Good morning. For those that have joined a few minutes later, my name is Morgan. I work at Microsoft as a platform strategy advisor. So I have a technical background, technical consulting background, and architecture. And for the last few years, well, since I've joined Microsoft, the last few years, I've spent time as an evangelist. So kind of spreading the future of where Microsoft is going. What are they doing around certain areas, but very much focused on IT professionals. And for the last, say, 12 months, been working more and more on the DevOps side. So I've been part of the team that's been able to build that messaging. And now it's kind of become a mainstream thing. There's quite a few DevOps content here at Ignite. I say tech ed, at Ignite. You just can't get rid of that. It's like ingrained in you at some point. And so, yeah, so I spend time now with customers and with partners, and I give them a view where Microsoft is going around the platform layer, whether it be Azure, whether it be O365, whether it be CRM, and whether it be Windows. And again, with Windows, everything inside of that, from personal devices to clients to tablets to HoloLens, etc. So I give enterprise customers a view of that. I spend time with our partners to ensure that they are at the right level to assist our customers. and I now focus very much more on ISVs around consuming our platform, around at the application layer. So I've got, the last few years I've been able to spread my technical skills quite a bit, and so I'm keen to interact with you guys today. I do have a lot of content to go through. If you've spent time reading, understanding, working with anything related to DevOps, you'll know it's a very, very broad topic. So I've got quite a few slides. I'd like to get through as many demos as possible as well to show you some of the interaction points around our software and where we're going. And I am going to be here for the next couple of hours. I'll gladly chat between the speaker changes or gladly sit outside if there's a lot of guys who want to chat. So if you've got some burning questions, feel free. The mics are on. You might have to just give me a show because I can't really see in the back there with the light. Just give me I want to ask a question, and then please step up to the mic and it's all yours. Otherwise, if you can hang on to the end, I'll gladly chat back and go through them. Okay. All right, cool. So I put 1 or 2 slides in the beginning. These are normally at the end, but as I said a bit earlier to the other guys, normally by the time you get to the closing slide, you're freely on your way out to get a coffee or get to the next session. So this session is part of this sweepstakes. If anyone's participating in that, you can use the URL, put my session code in there, and you'll go into the Azure sweepstakes that's on some select Azure sessions this week around there. Okay. Anyone else? Can I click through? Going, gone. All right. And the last one is this one here. We normally leave them to the end around resources, but I really think it's important seeing this piece in the beginning because we do have these central locations where we're pushing out quite a lot of DevOps-focused content. Now, within Microsoft, that's quite a broad range around who you engage with, whether it be on the development side, the operations side, or the evangelism side. But ideally, if you can keep these URLs as kind of your entry point, you will find a lot of content that we push out for that. The one at the bottom, the Talk DevOps, really is a key piece for us. We're getting a lot of information and questions back from our enterprise customers around what they're doing, what they're thinking, where they're going. So please, so take a photo, grab a picture of that. It will be at the end as well, so I will bring it up right at the end after I kind of summarize the session as well. All right, cool. Okay. All right, so what are we going to get in today? So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, if you've done anything with DevOps, you'll know it's a very broad subject. It's actually a very, very broad subject. And depending who you speak to, you'll get a variety of answers about what is DevOps, products that do DevOps, things that are DevOps, and it's very hard sometimes to get a straight answer. And so what I'm going to try and position in the next, say, hour or so is the structure around Microsoft's view around developer operations. I'll give you the structure around the thinking behind how to approach this, the stages to it, and then I'm going to relate it back to kind of the application lifecycle management. So what are the actual phases? And all through that, I'm going to kind of always talk back to the operations side or the IT professional side. But at the same time, if you go through the first few slides, you'll see why I always talk about the business and developers concurrently with operations. And that's the key piece, is those 3 personas need to be interacted all the way through. So every piece I talk about, every demonstration I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk more and more about that, around all 3 personas to understand where you need to interact with and how you need to interact with your kind of business or developer colleagues. Or if you're a developer in the room, your IT colleagues on the operations side. So what are the objectives in the session? So firstly, understand DevOps, and then being able to explain it back. So as an operations person, you might understand the tools that are out there. You might understand the thinking, the processes, but how do you relate that back to a business person? How do you show back the value of what you're doing in trying to streamline, in trying to make things happen quicker, in trying to interact with developers? And so I'm going to go through each section, and I'm going to relate it back to the business level. And that's normally where this DevOps piece breaks down, is that technical to business translation and vice versa. And the business is on its way to make money, and operations and developers are there to support and try and enable the business to make more money. It doesn't matter what you do. So ideally, that translation gets a bit missed sometimes. So I'm going to keep referring to why you'd want to talk about certain things to business and why you might want to focus on certain areas if you want to start to bring in some of these processes and technologies from what I'm going to show you. From a takeaways perspective, understand the operations role. If you've attended any DevOps sessions this week, you would have found that a lot of the focus is on the developer, and very much is around where Microsoft's going with the development of our platform, and there's some operations piece. I want to kind of highlight the key piece of how strategic the operations piece is. So I'm going to point that out along the way, and that's how you normally start your conversation with your developer or business personas in your environment. So I'm going to kind of highlight that as we go through each section as well. The last piece around the integration, that's to give you a view of where Microsoft's going around this whole cloud story. If you attended the keynote or you've seen some of the keynotes, if you missed it, the vision around on-premises, public, it's just the cloud. Let's just use it, let's consume it, and let's get the best out of it that suits us as a business or suits the model from a finance perspective. So yes, it says System Center, Visual Studio, and Azure, but ideally I'm going to talk around the integration pieces as well as the view of where we're going around all three components as well. Okay. I'm going to move between all three. So if you are very much an operations person, please don't freak out if you see me going into Visual Studio. I want you to understand the benefits that a developer will get if you start to work on certain areas that I'm going to show you in the back end. And vice versa. If you're a developer person and you see me jumping through System Center and showing you Ops Manager and VMM and a bit of Azure on the infrastructure side, see the benefits that you can get out of that if your infrastructure team or your operations team is starting to leverage that. And that's the key piece behind moving between all those components. Have the view of the benefits of the people on the other side. Okay. All right, so the phases around application lifecycle management. The first one around planning. And this slide really talks to the business around actually structuring what it's like to actually make money out there at the moment. It's really not about more innovative ideas, more innovative products. It's about going to market quicker than your competitor. Getting to market faster with your features or your solutions that you're going to offer to your customers or to the public, depending on what your focus is. The idea is the faster you get out, the sooner you can start to recoup. As well as that the fact that you can beat your competitor means you're probably going to win more audience across along the way. The last piece around time to market being key is very much what business wants to hear. So as we go through these key components today, think about the investments that the business has made around an enterprise agreement, certain licensing SKUs with Microsoft, certain investments around public cloud. How do you as an operations person translate that as a business value back to your key decision makers? How do they get the benefits out of the Azure piece? How do they get the benefits out of System Center's investment? How do they get the benefits out of the Visual Studio stack of products that we're throwing into there? And that's the way to start having the discussion around moving into this DevOps thinking and moving into this whole movement around adopting these processes along the way. This quote on the right-hand side, I found it about a year or a year and a half ago when we started to do this. And I love this idea over here that it's really not about having a sustainable advantage all the time. It's about getting to market quicker. It's about beating your competitors out there and then starting to make money along the way. And that really is where the market is at the moment. There's very few innovative ideas coming through. They come through, but not like they used to many years ago. So if you can enable your business to go to market quicker, you obviously win their hearts and minds and an investment for technology. If you can enable the developers to do the same around their feature sets or around what they're putting within the products, you'll win them over from a collaboration perspective. And that is the key piece around collaboration. And this slide, I'm going to build out the first piece around the three personas. So on the left-hand side around the developers, and you'll see the lovely broken wall between them and operations, and that's been there for many years, since day one. They always talk about throwing stuff over the wall to operations, or operations throwing stuff back over the wall to developers. And the downside is that's actually so true. Sometimes you don't even know who your developers are, yet you're supporting their applications. And on the right-hand side, this piece over here, the decision makers, the people who want the value out of their investment in technology. How do they see the benefits of what they've put in over here with you as operations people or with development teams? And so the key piece around this next build out in the slide, and I'm just going to play it all out, I'm not going to talk to it, is the stats and the information, the pain points that people feel along the way. It's not that one person feels pain, all three feel pain. So how do we alleviate those as quickly as possible? And the idea is to really start to build out and understand these components. And so if you can download these slides and keep this one slide for yourself, it doesn't matter what area you fit into, there's points that are relevant to yourself. If you're a customer and you've made an investment with us as Microsoft, how do you get the best value out of that investment? If you're a partner in the room and you are servicing our customers, how do you give them the best value from their investment from a licensing perspective, but your professional services as a trusted advisor for them? Back to their business, back to their operations people, back to their developers. And that's the simple circle from a sustainability perspective. So this slide, if you don't download the slides, please feel free to email me or tweet me. I'll gladly send it to you. I find this very handy handy to keep in your back pocket for any meeting, any discussion with either one of those personas in your environment. Okay, so what is this movement around DevOps? So this slide here has been focused on the application on lifecycle management framework that Microsoft's had for many years. It was focused very much on developers. How do you move your application from beginning to end and back again? Either new version, updates, bug fixes, what is that process? The downside was for many years that process was a very long process. Take our service packs, for example. How long did it take for service packs to come out to meet a certain feature or requirement that another product was waiting for? 12, 18 months sometimes. What a pain. But you waited for those because you got the benefits at that time. Now you look at the updates from any vendor, not just us. They come out daily, weekly, and monthly. The only way to do that is to shorten this life cycle down as quickly as possible. So we're going to spend some time now going through these key areas. We'll work from 1, 2, 3 to 4, and I'll explain the key focus pieces around the technology firstly that fits into that, and secondly, what the value would be to you using that technology as an operations person or as a developer, and keeping in mind the business, the actual stakeholders along the way. So what we've done is we've flattened this now from a usage perspective. The next 2 slides will show you those same stages, 1, 2, 3, and 4, the relevant Microsoft products that sit inside of that. And then the next slide is around the open source piece as well, in exactly the same fashion. That's a key piece for us. And I'll flick between these 2 slides now for a few minutes. But this is very key for us because we're adopting the real world. The real world is not just Windows Server. The real world is not just Visual Studio. The real world is a multitude of technologies. And so this is a very, very big piece for us. If you're an operations person and you work with development teams, maybe go and kick the tires a bit and see what technology they're using. You'll probably find some of these names are going to pop out. You might not understand those names when you hear them, like a chef or a puppet. It's kind of like, what's that about? Using cookbooks and recipes, you're like, The benefit to that is you can start to integrate those components with your Microsoft investment. And that's a key strategy for us. So let's go back for 1 second. So the same 4 phases, the Microsoft technologies, that slots in there and fits in there. And if you're an enterprise customer, you probably have all of that in your stack. And going one more forward, the open source side. And that is key. As I'm going to talk more and more now, I'm going to focus on that integration piece as well. Before we started, I was just having a general chat around platform and strategy for platform for Microsoft. The idea is if we adopt more of this, we get more consumption on our platform. The benefits are we enable IT professionals and developers to get the best out of the tools and technologies they have at hand. Okay. Again, I encourage you, pull this deck down, and this piece will be getting updated more and more from a technology perspective as we start to interact and integrate with more open source people. Let's have a quick look at that from a downside to water and electronics. Sorry. Let's just pop over here for a sec. And this is the piece where you would start to go and get some information, whether you're planning, whether you're a business, whether you're servicing customers. This URL is very key around that. So if you have customers that have big development teams, send them to this. Show them the projects that Microsoft is doing. Show them the integration with open source. And let your customers understand what Microsoft's vision is around integration with open source. Really, really simple. Jump into the top over here, under projects. Little DevOps section over here. And if you drill into that, you'll get a view of the different flavors that we support. Whoops, one too many. And as you step through each of these over here, let's take Docker as an example. We'll start to pull some information out of this, but we'll start to give you more information of where you can pull down articles and start to understand how to use this, how to integrate with this. So if your developers are using anything inside of this, it's a great way to start a conversation. If you're a developer and you're using some of this, it's a great way to go to your operations people and say, can we start to leverage the benefits of what Microsoft is doing along the way? So that MS OpenTech URL is really a handy one to save. And I've dumped it into the slide for that very, very reason. And we add a lot more content into that. The other piece to that is tutorials, how-tos. How do I use Docker on Windows? How do I use Git? How do I use integration with the open source technology that Microsoft is starting to embrace? Okay, and this piece I want to spend 2 minutes on this. So if you look from the ground up, that's our stack. On the left-hand side, the Microsoft piece. On the right-hand side, kind of what we integrate with and work with. And I want to spend 2 minutes on this piece over here at the bottom, because that really is key to what we're going to talk about for the rest of today. That little layer called management. In focus, really, it's configuration management. So how do I ensure that my state is consistent? Doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a developer, whether you're an operations person. I want to ensure that my state, my operating system, what's on it, is consistent. If I ensure consistency, I have a really well-oiled machine. My SLA will come down. My support gets better. I don't have to maintain or chase as much from a support perspective. So what we've done is we've started to invest and integrate with third party, but also allowed third parties to integrate with us. So does anyone use PowerShell DSC? I expected a lot more. Wow, okay, that is a surprise. That is something that has taken off phenomenally in the last year because of the benefits of a consistent state. Whether I'm pushing something to the state or whether I keep it in consistent state is key to administration of your infrastructure. So what we've done is we've started to integrate now with Chef and Puppet, very much more with Chef in the last little while, whether it be on premises with PowerShell DSC, whether it be with Azure and having the relevant installation agents to use along the way. The key to this is, as an operations person, I'm ensuring that my state is consistent before an application is put into production. That's what you really care about. What if we do it the other way around and we ensure that the developers have a consistent state from the develop phase into UAT, into pre-production, into production? If I ensure they're in a consistent state before they even get to me, I know what I'm going to get is going to be a quality product. So I'm going to highlight that a bit more as I talk through the different sections around from develop into operate along the way. This piece on the right-hand side over here is going to grow. On the left-hand side, we're just going to start to support more and more from a platform perspective. Again, another very nice, handy slide to hang on to from a technical perspective. Now, here's some key questions. And I'm going to refer back to these as I go through each section, whether it's planning, whether it's designing, whether I'm showing you System Center or Azure. When does the application development actually start? As a show of hands, who gets involved in the ideation phase? You know, when the business goes, I want an app with 3 green giraffes. Who sits in that phase then? Okay, very few. For those that don't sit in that phase, it's very hard to understand what the business is expecting and developers require along the way. So if you sit earlier in the beginning and you start to use our tools earlier in the beginning, you start to ensure consistency in what gets delivered through the relevant stages. The other questions are around where is the app eventually going to live? Under a desk, in a data center, in the public cloud. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, where's it going to end up? The business might have a view of where it should be. The developers know where they want it. IT is going, I know where it's going to sit because I have to support it. And normally those are 3 very different views along the way. That question needs to be asked when you start to leverage this DevOps movement. And the only way to answer these questions is to be involved right in the beginning, in the ideation phase. Because at some point when you walk away, each one goes away with some tasks. Business goes away knowing I want 3 green giraffes. IT goes away, knows it must be in AWS. Developers go, well, I've got a pre-prod environment I can use in the data center, and off you go. By the time you come back to the development stage, we don't have 4 pink elephants, and we're using Google, and we're sitting over there, which is unfortunately the downside to these long lead times for development. So some of these questions, and I'm going to show them back at the end of the session again, are the key questions to ask right in the beginning when you start to evaluate where developers are going to host, use, build, or design their applications. The one at the bottom normally impacts operations the most. Awesome, we're developing new applications. Whose cost center is it coming off? Normally, it's IT's cost center. The benefit here now is if I can start to use the tools that I'm going to demonstrate to you, can I show or charge that costing back? It's a great way for you to show value back to your business. And if you are servicing customers as an integrator or a partner doing professional services, you can show value back to them, to the billing engine, to the processing side from a user's perspective. So these questions around where, what, when, how, very key to have along the way from a development perspective. All right, so develop phase, the second one, number 2. Starting with the idea behind building out code. Developers walk away with an understanding what the business wants, and off they go, and they start to develop those components. We run through these various stages along the way, and then it gets released. Where does that release happen? Well, that could be a variety of locations. Again, it could be a kit that you've dedicated just to developers. It could be a box under a desk. It could be to a dev test environment in the cloud. It could be the MSDN subscription that developers are using, and they've spun up and they get their $100, $150 a month. So that needs to be understood. Because if you want to start assisting, ensure there's consistent state earlier in the phase, I need to know where that's going to reside and where that's going to sit from a user's perspective. So let's understand a little bit more about that from a technology perspective. So VSO and TFS and the strategy Microsoft has around that. Key piece for automation, whether it be on-premises, whether it be in the cloud, whether it be both. Last week at Build, we made some big announcements around what we're doing from a VSO perspective with Visual Studio Online. How do we start to do more services in the public cloud, managing on-premises services? And vice versa, how do I enable or add more features to TFS to possibly push services to Azure? We want it to be as simple as possible. Your developers have made an investment in a technology, some sort of technology. How do we get the best out of that? If they've made an investment in TFS as an example, how do we enable them to do more? As an operations person who's maybe looking at using Microsoft Azure, how do I let them use the benefits of what VSO gives them in that side as well? But at the same time, keeping control. We want to enable developers to do as much as possible. Generate code as quickly as possible, add features, go. But at the same time, we want to control. We want to control budget, we want to control spending, we want to control all the pieces that come with IT, basically, along the way. So the investments we're making around approvals, check-ins, authorization, approvals, that's becoming more and more granular and integrated into Active Directory and into Azure Active Directory, ensuring there's a process along all this way. And that's normally the piece that's missing along this DevOps movement, is process. Things just end up in pre-prod and then go over the wall. But what about if we have a staged process throughout that? How do we ensure the business has to approve certain stages? How do we ensure that when it gets to us as an IT professional, we have to support it, the business has approved that build that's gone out? And so when I show you some of the components, I'll focus a little bit more on that and show you the value that the business or IT or devs would get out of that along the way. On an automation perspective, we'll spend a bit of time having a look at this now quickly. How do I enable developers to develop as much as possible, as quickly as possible, without always phoning me, emailing me, sending me tickets, I want this, change this, where's this version, I'm using MSDN, I'm using enterprise version of SQL. How do we get a move away from that? But enable them to do as much as possible. So the first kind of demonstration will be to understand what can we do to automate as much as possible. How do we give them flexibility but control at the same time? So let developers carry on, yet I've given you an area to work in. How do I enable you to do as much as possible using the integration between System Center and Visual Studio? Let's have a quick look at that now and understand those key components. Show of hands, who uses TFS? Okay, same set of hands, stay up, stay up, stay up. Who uses System Center? Okay, cool. So almost everyone in the room. Who integrates TFS and System Center? Wow. Okay, I mean, this integration has been there for quite a few versions, quite a few years, from a flexibility and benefits perspective. But now I want to show you the benefits you can get of doing that integration and the move that we've got going from an Azure Resource Manager perspective as well. Okay. All right, so the first piece, so for the majority who didn't put their hands up around integration, just a quick walk through where this sits. So what we have over here is TFS, and I've got VMM running on the other side, the console perspective. I'm doing a simple show and tell around the lab management component. And all I've really done is given access to a location from a library perspective, from a host perspective. So I'm apportioning a part of a cloud to my developers to use. And they can do whatever they want in that cloud. But ideally, I want to enable them, but restrict them within that cloud as well along the way. So all I've done is I've pointed my Team Foundation server to this VMM server, and I've allocated certain services to them to use. If I drill back down into VMM, by default, when I start to build in that integration, I start to get clouds automatically added in. And then I can add restrictions, I can customize, I can put process onto that. The idea is I want to enable developers to have a cloud to use. But that cloud might be the very old equipment that we have. It might not be the best we have in our data center because that's their pre-prod environment or their UAT. But the idea behind this is over here is I am controlling where they use the certain services, but I'm enabling them on the Visual Studio side to do a lot more within those services. If I drill down to the actual library itself, and I spend a little bit of time over here, so from a templating perspective, I have built out certain locations over here. Certain templates. Associated to those templates, I put a cost center in, so now I can track. I can see what's being used, how it's being used, and I can either show or charge back that costing. If I'm providing the service to customers, it's a great way to pull into from a billing perspective. On the left-hand side, from the names perspective, I've just got a little bit granular, because when a developer works within these tools, I don't want him to have VMM as a console. He just works within these tools that he has access to and that he uses along the way. Within those templates themselves, I've built a little bit more control. So if I drill into one of them, just go into that one over here, I've spent a little bit of time on configuring these components. Sorry, wrong one. And then I determine who has access to this. So only the people in the relevant security group in Active Directory can see these templates and use these templates. Now, I can get very granular with that as well. So I could have different development teams, so they get certain access to certain services along the way. Depending on your access, will determine how your OS is configured, what versions, what look and feel, what naming conventions, where's it going to sit, the configuration that enables the developers to roll out these services as quickly as possible to build out their environments along the way. So I've put in the building blocks that are required for me to enable developers on the other side. I'm using my investment in VMM to do those components. If I move back from a development perspective and I move back to their test manager component, and this is ideally where developers will spend time, whether they're testing or whether they're building out environments, and this is where they will leverage the investment in the service templates that I built for them, or the VM templates I built for them along the way. Now they can come out and build their environments and use them. So now we're just looking at purely on premises from a development perspective. So there I can see the same templates that are available to be used, same naming conventions, etc. So the developer has a view of what he's actually using along the way. If I drill into the environments and I build out a new environment, just do a simple ignite, add a few components in, say next. I can't really do anything with it because it's been managed by VMM along the way. So a lot of stuff's grayed out, it's confined. But at this point, the developer can build out whatever environment he wants based on the templates that we've given him. He will have as many servers as you want, go wild. But you're restricted by what we've given you from a templates perspective. We've restricted you by what we've given you within the cloud restriction perspective. So at some point, you're going to hit a limit. And if I swing back to this piece over here, that was based purely on what I've given him around quotas. I mean, that's flexible to how you do that and how you set that up. But ideally, I'm constricting him to how these things work along the way. If I pop back to this component over here, and I would step through, and VMM will build out that piece in the relevant cloud that we've assigned access to along the way. And within, say, 10, 15 minutes, depending on your resources, the developer has his OS, and he can start working with those machines. The end result is that he ends up with an environment, similar to the one that's running over here, very, very simple environment. Do a quick connect to that one. It's running over here. So now my developer has environments that he can work in. Whether he needs to use the GUI from whatever perspective, UI tests, work, doesn't really matter, or whether he actually just wants to target that environment from a build process perspective, doesn't really matter. And I can allow him to start to build in snapshots along the way. So if he needs to run a test or show something to other development teams or show something back to business, he can move that backwards and forward from a development perspective. In the background, VMM is taking care of that. Hyper-V is doing the low-level work on the other side. The developer doesn't need VMM. He just stays in the tools that he knows, and he uses those components. If we take a simple example of this one that's running over here, I've got a small social integration one for my application. Now I'll get into my developer's experience. And the reason I'm showing you this is to give you the view of how you can enable developers to really win their hearts and minds to use this and to use this process. Because once they start to see the benefits of the speed and ability to target these environments from the tools they know, they're much more open to integrate and work with if you start to go down this DevOps route from a business perspective. So over here, I have a build definition, very simple build definition. I'm just going to edit that one. And I'm just going to focus on the process side for a second. And over here is where you can start to target. So you can start to target the type of templates you're going to provide to these users. Now, you can have tons of custom templates. You can pull some templates off online as well, whether it be a continuous deployment, integration, doesn't really matter. But the key piece over here is I start to allow my developers to have templates they can use to target relevant locations. If I take my lab template as an example, I'll drill in here for a second. Now I start to build out my actual workflow. Well, where is this all going to run? Well, it's going to run now, I might have a huge list of environments over here, depending on how the developers built out these environments. If I select that, so cool, what snapshots do you want to use? Now you can relevantly use the snapshots that are available to him. Because he might have run a build and had an issue, and say, well, let me run it against the previous snapshot and see what the differences were along the way. Run the tests, oh, that's what the problem, fix the code, run it against the older snapshot, or the newer snapshot, and slowly step through those components. If I say next to that, just do a simple. And then you can start to pull in and drill down to whatever environments are built into that from a client perspective. And so you can start to target that environment. But just staying in these tools, there's no need for him to really speak to IT anymore for that period of time. Infrastructure's there, the cloud is there, the templates are there, he has the tools. But how did IT populate that information? How did they know what versions of OS, what versions of SQL, what versions of .NET? How must IIS be configured? What extra apps do you want to run in there? Do you have batch files? Do you have PowerShell scripts you want to run? How does IT know all of that? Hopefully they've been in the beginning, in the ideation phase, and they've asked those questions. Where's it going to run? What do you need? How does it run? What does the app need? Do you have some magic little script that you run before you install it that you never tell us about? Oh yeah, we just run this little batch file and then we install, and it just works every time. I want that to be sitting in my library and be used. Because when the developer starts to automate this, his tools are available for him to use along the way. And this is now building out that base infrastructure for them to use. So just in the deploy phase now, I'm giving them the ability to have a standard infrastructure along the way. Now I start to build on top of that from a release perspective, and I start to move down the relevant stages of an application lifecycle along the way. It's a very simple example of building out simple infrastructure along the way. But the key piece over here is if I start to enable my developers at this level over here, from a templating perspective and from a cloud perspective, if I enable them, they can work. They don't have to go and ask for stuff. They don't have to use, they just get access to it immediately from a usage perspective. But the problem is if I don't customize the right-hand side, they're still going to keep coming back to me, or they just will no longer use it along the way. The other piece to this is the business stamp of approval on this process. There has to be a move backwards and forwards between deploying environments and someone consuming that and someone being charged for that along the way. How many people have a show back process in place? So you show the costing back. Who has a charge back process in place? Wow, okay. No, so I mean, I've been doing this for like 18 months now, and it's the first time I've had like a small amount of hands. It's like, I expect them to grow. They've been growing, year by year. Okay, that's different. It's very rare I'm lost for words, I'll tell you that. The reason I ask this is because if you look at my third or fourth slide I showed you around agility, sustainability for business, where is the money going in your business? It's going to IT. You're a massive cost to the business. You want to start using Azure? No, it's costing us money. You want the new version of Windows Server? No, we're canceling our EA. We're cutting back, cutting costs. You don't use it. No, we do use it. Well, where? Show me. Such a little simple thing. If you can show back costing, whose buy-in are you going to get? The business. You need their buy-in for longevity for your technology. Wow, that took me off guard. I need to tweet that. That took me off earlier. Okay. The benefits to this is if you get the buy-in from business, they support you along the way. You struggle with developers, business will help you. Developer struggles with operations, the business will help you because they see the benefits of what you're doing with the investment they've made along the way. Whether you're a customer or you're a partner servicing a customer, it's actually a very, very simple model. But if I can attach it through a process, I automatically show that value all along the way. The next piece I'm going to show you around release is where you start to pull this information through and you start to get approval from business in moving an application through the relevant cycle. All right, cool. Well, not cool. That actually sucked. But, it is what it is. Okay. Is this being recorded? I just only thought about that now. I apologize for saying it. I actually forgot about that. Okay. Just move back for a second for this to position this next piece. Okay, so building base infrastructure. Who's attended an ARM session so far, Ignite, Azure Resource Manager? Good, bad? But you've been doing this since you've walked in. When I asked you the question, the back's like, Okay, the reason I'm asking this is very key for us. Because what I've showed you now on the on-premises piece is the key piece for us for templatizing and reproducing on a large scale using Azure, or pulling back down from a private cloud perspective in your own on-premises. So the ARM piece is very key for us. If I can start to build exactly the same components in my gallery around service templates, around look and feel, around scripting components, exactly what I showed you now on premises, that sits on the public cloud side. I control my public cloud expenditure, I control my public cloud cost, and everyone can see it. If you go to the new portal in Azure, everyone sees the same thing. You customize access control, the business sees the value of where their money's going. Developers see their applications and the performance. IT gets to see the value of the infrastructure along the way. So this piece is very key for us along the way. So we'll make investments in on-premises, and that's not going anywhere. But this is where you'll see a huge amount of investment going into. If you consume public cloud services, how often do the updates come out? A lot quicker than we roll out the next version of the on-premises software. So again, the benefits from a business perspective in subscribing into using public cloud services along the way. So only like 5 of you put your hands up. The rest of you, I'd encourage you to have a look at an ARM session before you finish this week, or at least pull one down. So to get a view of what I positioned to you now on premises on the public cloud side. Okay, so we have base infrastructure. We don't care anymore where it is. Again, under the cupboard, public, private, doesn't really matter. We have a infrastructure. If we control it and we put processes on top of it, I can start to allow proper release all the way through. So stage 3. And this is normally where it just gets to the wall or just goes over the wall from a development perspective to operations. So on the release side, excuse me, it's all the orange juice I've been drinking every night. It's getting to my throat. Well, or at least 2 got it. Oh, hey. And it would be the 2 I know. Okay, a lot of orange juice this week. And Fanta Cokes and those sort of things. Okay, this piece now is key. Because as an application starts to move through development stages, UAT, pre-prod, prod, we want to learn along the way. Developers move it through the stages, so they learn. They adapt the application, and ideally, hopefully, the code gets smaller, becomes faster, becomes easier, and they get to pre-prod, and they throw it over the wall, and it goes to production. And then operations supports it. If we can get a view as operations earlier in what is actually going on in the application, we can enable them for how we manage production environments, well, they can learn quicker. If we now run scripts and have PowerShell commandlets and batch files and little secret tools that we run to make an app work, or we do a weekly reboot and no one knows about it, if we do that in production, we want to ensure the developers know about it in earlier stages, because they can cater for that in the application development side. They can cater for those scripts, they can cater for those changes when they start to release an app through the stages. So we're going to spend a few minutes now understanding what those stages are, and how do you do that on premises or with public cloud? How do you leverage the benefits of proper release management? Who deals with release management? And you guys don't have processes for chargeback? No, come on. Serious. Release management is key to showback and chargeback. How long does an app take to get from here to here? Well, it's taken a week. Well, why did it take a week? That's costing us money. That's a week's worth of something not working. I need to show where that's going. Where's that time going? What resources are being used? When it gets to production, then you care, because then it's live and there's an SLA attached to it. If you have release management already, now it's a matter of putting one little thin layer on top of that for tracking. Where are the resources being used? How are they being used? And how are they being consumed? And I'll show you that now from an on-premises and public cloud perspective. Our view, and this builds back on that slide I showed you earlier around the whole stack. On the bottom over here, again, in the green, we don't really care anymore where it sits from a release management perspective. If you're using us, competitors, both of us, it doesn't really matter anymore. From a usage perspective, we are more interested in the configuration management layer. That piece I highlighted to you in the red, the investment are ensuring consistent state along the way. That is the future for us. Because if we ensure consistent state, we have buy-in from operations, we have buy-in from developers along the way. On top of that sits release management. So if your infrastructure is set out correctly, like clouds, templates, control, chargeback, showback codes. You can start to drop down the configuration state on top, a configuration management layer on top, to ensure your state is consistent. Again, it doesn't matter what cloud you're using, but I want to ensure state is consistent. Whether you're using PowerShell over here and you're talking to Microsoft stack, whether you're integrating with Chef and talking to non-Microsoft, doesn't really matter for us anymore. And that is why it's really worthwhile understanding those first few resources I showed you on the links. That is where we've put a lot of articles and how-tos around integrating those components along the way. Okay. All right, so we're going to focus on this top piece over here now, around release management. How does it work? How do we use it? What are the benefits? So we made an acquisition about 18 months or 2 years ago called InRelease. Does anyone use release management? So most of you put your hands up doing release management, and I said, does anyone use release management? There's like 3. Who uses any release management tools? Okay. Either I can't see properly, or the answers are coming through very wrong. So on release management now, we want to build out stages. We want to ensure our developers have their stages set up correctly. And by a stage, we're saying develop, UAT, UAT3, pre-prod, prod. Associated to those is infrastructure. Associated to the infrastructure is configuration management. Associated to configuration management is an approval process along the way. That's the kind of layer we want to build in and put in place. Release management allows us to build that structure out to ensure that we can move an app through those stages as seamlessly as possible, and ideally following a proper release process along the way. From a visibility perspective, and this comes back to my comment I made a few minutes ago, if you do release management, you want to see where your investment is going. Why is my app taking a week to go from pre-prod to prod? Well, that's because the IT pro guys are hammering the testing. They want to do serious testing. We're doing Windows patches on it first. And okay, that's fine. Then it's justifiable. But if it's just because people are taking their time, that's a loss to the business. 1 week, over a few months, that starts to add up to the business. That adds up as a cost. Again, IT's cost center along the way. So if we give visibility from a business perspective, everyone gets to understand that along the way. The consistent release piece over here plays back in again to ensuring that from the very first time the app starts in the development phase, all the way to production, it's as consistent as possible. The benefits, I ensure my app is consistent as it gets rolled out and improved along the way. So by the time it gets to me in operations, it's in a good state to be supported. The workflow piece, and I'm going to jump you through this console in a few minutes. The workflow piece is important. If you can attach the workflow to your own processes you have, does anyone have change control boards? CAB boards that meet? All right, so you've got a process already in place. They meet certain time of the day, week, month, year. If you can adapt it to that so that the approval process goes into that change board's regular rhythm, well, there we go. We've got the process piece done already. Now I just need to make sure I've got the release management tools in place and the relevant infrastructure in place. So one layer taken care of from an approval perspective. Doesn't mean they have to push it through the process, but they maybe need to sign off on it. And then it can carry on from one stage to the next stage along the way. This last piece over here, from an interaction perspective, that change board could have the relevant rights and permissions to have view of what is going on in my environment. If I'm going to approve a change from UAT to pre-prod, I want to see what this is about. I don't need to have a view of in-depth coding or technical abilities. I just want to know what the process is that I need to approve from a development move perspective in the stage itself. So let's have a quick look at that on the other side over here. Oh, would help. Okay, so looking kind of on-premises first, and keep in mind, everything I'm kind of showing you on those different phases, we're doing exactly the same from a public and private cloud perspective. The technology that we've acquired here, and the thinking, the process, and the actual code itself, is moving into Visual Studio Online as well to allow proper release management from a public cloud perspective. And now, as the iterations start to come out in the next few months, we'll start to do more on-premises management from the VSO side. So if you haven't made an investment in release management on premises, it's worthwhile having a look at the online component first and seeing if that is sufficient enough for you to use. If you're using this already and you're going to move through the upgrade path, you'll get the benefits of just obviously using and managing and releasing to Azure along the way. So that's my stages. So again, these are a very simple example. I've got a few stages my application is going to move through. I might have multiple stages. It could be a few UATs, pre-prod, prod. There could be another layer in between that if need be. But the piece I want to focus on really is, firstly, get my zoomer to work. So firstly is this piece over here. That one over there. So from an approval perspective, someone needs to accept that. The code won't go from this stage to that stage until someone has clicked the button. Ideally, that should fit into your change process. Maybe the first two is really simple. It's just the dev guys moving it through. But when it goes from QA to a pre-prod, there's a UAT team who needs to stamp. And they take liability for moving it across. Now I've assigned responsibility to that. Maybe from pre-prod to prod, my change board would assign responsibility to someone to approve that to go into production. They meet weekly. Yes, we're happy. The tests have been done. Great. Click the big red button. Rather, the green button. Red would stop it, I suppose. The green button. And move it across to the other stage. So that piece is important to set up. You can't assign the responsibility and ownership unless you have been involved in the beginning, in the ideation phase. Rights, roles, responsibilities. It's great to know what the application is going to look like. Who's the owner? Who's the sponsor? Who's going to approve it? Who's going to deny it? IT can walk away knowing people have been assigned responsibility. They can build their templates out in place. They can assign security groups to that. They can drill those security groups into release management. And you're starting to build up control as operations. So when the developers move it through the process, you're confident that the right people have approved it to go across. By the time it comes to you over that big wall, you know it's been approved, and it should be of a much higher quality than possibly what you were used to in the past. So from an administration perspective, that piece is key. If you can show that value back to the business of how you're actually checking code in all the way through, great. But if I'm approving it as well along the way, that's some value from a sustainability perspective as well. If I now move back, and now we look at the comments I made earlier around IT learning about what developers do and helping them, templates, et cetera, et cetera. But what if we can enable them to do more sooner? So if you think about your infrastructure now, scripts, batch files, tools, third-party tools, Microsoft tools, anything you use to keep the lights on, why don't we use that same stuff within release management? Why don't we give that across to developers and let them start using those components earlier in the stage? So the idea now is to start to populate this infrastructure with tools for them to use. If I just close this for a second and jump back down to inventory, I have two areas to look at. So actions and tools. My actions are the components that I would use to actually run and actually automate and do some work. And I'm going to show you where these get used now. But ideally, I want to bring content in. If I have PowerShell scripts that I'm using, I want to bring them in. If that PowerShell script reboots a box every Monday morning, well, why is it rebooting the box? Let's bring it in. Let the developers see what the impact is of their application. Will they care that it gets rebooted? If I have to restart an IIS service once a day for a particular reason, well, why is it doing that? Let the developers work on that sooner. Let them use that script that you're using in production sooner in the environment. The benefits are they can start to fix those issues and produce higher quality code along the way. So now I've got my actions that are available to me, whether it be using the Azure VM Manager, whether it be using the Automated Test Manager. That one you see over there, so MTM, that's the tool I showed you earlier with the developers building out their environments and targeting them. Well, now I can start to use that over here. So when they start to get to the first phase, they can use this tool to target that environment that they're using in Visual Studio that you've built with VMM. Remember, we've done the infrastructure. We're now using Release Manager above that to target that infrastructure. If I've integrated those two components, I get the benefits over here. Now my developer can start to build out all his relevant stages, build out his relevant processes and releases, and just pull the relevant tools in. So right, for this application, this piece of code, use that environment. That environment happens to sit in the Facebook cloud on VMM. This piece is a Twitter integration. Well, yes, use my Microsoft Test Manager in that environment, which sits in the Twitter cloud. Now I'm starting to enable my developers to do a lot more with native tools that we've built out using Virtual Machine Manager and using the integration with Visual Studio. If I go across the tools section itself over here, you'll see, actions. No, it wasn't tools. Back again, come on. It's a little jerky. Here's where I can start to add more and customize. And these are the default ones that come in from a Microsoft perspective. So you'll see there's ones here around SQL, simple Windows ones. So you'll see the category over here determines what you can do, whether you want to copy a file, move a folder, restart a service, start a VM, stop a VM, an Azure VM, on-premises VM. These are the simple actions you can pull. Then you customize them to the hilt to suit you for the model of how you're rolling the applications out along the way. Ideally, I would come into this and start to extend this. So if I took the Microsoft Test Manager as an example, zoom in there for a second, all it wants to know is information about the relevant environment I'm going to be using. Remember, I click through the wizard and I select the Fabricate environment, I select the snapshot to use, the environment name. I just need to populate that here. Now my developer just calls that action every single time, and I target that environment all the time. So I'm simplifying the process, I'm making it quicker, but I'm controlling where he's doing it along the way. If I step back a second and I move into my releases, I'll open this for a second. Sorry, not my release. My path. Here is when I can start to customize from a development perspective. Where, how are these actually apps going to roll out and be used? How should I configure it? Where should it sit? And I can have a whole list of them along the way. But if I don't have the infrastructure base set in place already, it makes it a bit hard to use. So in this current release, which is the current release out online, I can start to target Azure or on-premises, depending on what I want to use. If I go back to my paths, and I move into my environments over here, and I go add in, I can select what services I want to use and what I want to target. So yeah, I'm looking at a physical and an Azure VM along the way. The benefits of here is I've invested on premises, I can scale to Azure. If I haven't invested on premises with release, I can start to leverage public and talk back to on-premises along the way. From an apps perspective, I just drill into my template itself. This is where I have my stages that will be used. So again, my different stages I would access and use as a developer. Here's my toolbox on the left-hand side. And let's do just a simple copy file and folder. Put it over here. Let's edit it. What do you want to do? What should the line command be? And now on the left-hand side, if I can enable that as an operations person for my developers, they can call all those tools that we're using in production earlier in the development cycle. Now they learn along the way. So by the time it comes to you, either you might not need those tools anymore, those little batch files you run, those little scripts, because they've actually fixed the issues along the way, or you probably find they don't even know what you're using. They just know the app runs, and once a week it gets restarted. Okay. And that's the normal cycle that goes along the way. Again, you can enable that left-hand side if you understand the application from phase one when you start to plan and build those components out along the way. Okay, so a little bit around release management. If I go back here for a second into here, at this point now we've kind of got over the wall to operations in the whole life cycle. Now we're supporting, we're using it. Now it's time to understand what's actually going on with the application. Is it actually performing like it should be? Is it working accordingly? Is it any information I was passed back to the developers along the way? Now I need to understand my app. But I also want to protect my infrastructure because that's what I support and what I look after. So now we're going to understand a little bit more around currently how you can do it, whether it be on-premises, whether it be Azure. And I'll show you some of the components that were released last week for consumption, a public preview from a Microsoft Azure perspective along the way. So if we think of monitoring along the way, yes, I want to monitor. I want to understand. I have an SLA that I'm bound to as operations. But I also want to learn. I want to know how the app works on my infrastructure. Do I need to change my infrastructure, modify, tweak? But if I can get my developers to learn quicker, sooner, it makes it easier by the time it comes to production along the way. So learning is important. It also helps us feed back to the developers and the business. So those 3 giraffes you wanted, the green ones don't work. They don't work in production. The users are fighting, it doesn't work on Amazon, doesn't work on Google, whatever it may be. We need to make them elephants. Great. Next version of the application starts to come out, and we make those changes along the way. At the same time, if we learn, we can provide valuable information back. They don't look at us as a cost center anymore. They look at us as an enabler along the way. So all of a sudden, monitoring and learning becomes important. As a kind of a bracket, application performance monitoring has two pieces inside of it from a Microsoft perspective. We have the system center component, and we have the actual insights perspective with VSO. Now, we're breaching that divide again of not caring where the cloud sits. So if I'm using System Center currently, I want to extend to monitor Azure. If I'm using Insights in Azure, I want to extend back to on-premises. That's the strategy and roadmap we have going forward. So again, depending where you've made your investment, you can leverage either or along the way. The benefits, obviously, of public cloud, faster releases, faster updates along the way. But what I want to show you in the demonstration now is I want to show you the consistency of views between ops and dev to ensure that everyone understands what they're looking at and the time to fix is shorter, or that mean time to repair, MTTR, is shorter along the way. Ideally, learning quicker from a usage perspective. All right, so let's move across. No, I forgot about, I put the slide in last night. So this is what they announced last week on the public preview. If you go to that URL, or if you just go to portal.azure.com, you can subscribe to using this, and it'll determine are you adding insights into your code, or you want to monitor servers, and you can test for free and see what it looks like. Very, very handy little piece to start playing with already. All right, so have a quick look at this on the other side. Who's using Ops Manager at the moment? SCOM? Got a few. Okay, cool. Who's using TFS and SCOM integrated? Okay. For the rest of you, put your hands up with SCOM. So there's two that are doing it. The integration piece obviously gives you a huge amount of workflow processing of moving alerts and work items backwards and forwards. And you'll see the benefits of that now from a single source of truth. Okay. So the idea what I want to show you over here is that an alert comes in, it's used. Doesn't matter who gets the alert, operations, first, second, third line, doesn't really matter. An alert comes in, and there's an issue. What do we do with it? Now, if we know what the issue is, and we can assign it and move it to a developer, perfect. But I also want to ensure that the moving of an alert and creating work items backwards and forwards is consistent, and everyone sees the same content along the way. So over here, I've got an alert that's come in. Just had a simple little moan. So normally as IT, I would have no idea what that means. Over here, that this sort of exception has been occurred and thrown. First line, no idea. Second line, well, I don't know what that means. But normally, third line will work it out. Oh, it's that website. Please have a look at this. Talk to developers. And so the process of resolving this will come through. That URL over there, the important piece to have a look at is that we want consistent truth. Everyone sees the same content that's been generated from this alert. We all see the same issue along the way. We also have a view now of how long it takes to move this backwards and forwards and understand the repair time. So this integration has happened now between Ops Manager and TFS. As an alert comes in, if I assign it to engineering, it creates a work item on the TFS side. The work item can then be assigned to a developer or development team, and they can start to work with it. Need more information, they can pass it back. Ops guys can run some more tests, pass it back again. So we have a bit of a workflow between the two. A very simple example. As an operations person, I click on this link that's opened up over here, and I want to see what this is about. So a little Event ID window opens up, and this means absolutely nothing to me. I have no idea what this means whatsoever. So ideally, we'd look at this and go, well, it's this website. This is the team that looks at it. Let's send it to them along the way. But what you're seeing over here is exactly the same view that developers will get on the other side from a support perspective. If I now, first to get out of Zoom it, if I now assign this to engineering, over here, I set my resolution state, and I assign it to engineering, it'll kick in. It's assigned to engineering. Now my developers sitting wherever they are in the world, they've got the good old Visual Studio tools that are available to them, and they've got a process of help desk, first, second line, third line, and they just look for operational issues. So when that alert was sent over to TFS, it creates a work item, and that work item type is operational issue. So all I've done is I've set up a little simple query over here to look for all operational issues, show them all to me. They're available, and I should have a number 15, hopefully, that's come in. Hey, there it is at the bottom. That's the one I sent across now to be used. And if you look at the bottom, we're looking at the same information. Same, or for those at the back, same URL. Okay, now my little first line guy kicks into this on the development side, and he goes, I know exactly what that is. I want to see what's happened, and maybe I can debug it straight away. So options, download IntelliTrace log. It says open. It opens in this good old trusty tool called Visual Studio. I'll expand that. Great. Now immediately, my developer knows there was an issue in this piece of the code. Now my developer knows what he's doing with it. He knows who to assign it to. He knows who can go fix it and go and have a look at it. The same thing will happen on the operations side if they did the same thing. Download IntelliTrace log file. It'll open Visual Studio. Visual Studio is installed on their machine, and they can interpret it and use it if they want to. But the key piece over here is we have consistent truth of what's wrong with this problem. There's an issue that's been caused. Now we're assigning responsibility to it. A developer is going to have to go and fix it. There's SLA associated to it. The ops team have gone, it's your problem, fix it. Now the SLA sits with the development team. Now they're responsible to repair that. Now possibly they might want more information back from that perspective. Say, right, I like this, I know what the issue is, but I need to see a bit bigger, a bit longer from a stack perspective. So if I stop that, I could come back into this issue over here. Just open it up. Say, yes, I'm happy to accept this. Save that. We'll assign it. Just give it to myself. Save. And now I can work on it. Now I work on it and I want more information back. So right, I actually need to get some more information from the ops team. So I say awaiting evidence. So please send me coffee and biscuits. Save work item. Give it a second. Now my trusty developer guy, operations people sit on the other side. Let's do a quick refresh. It says awaiting evidence. So a quick look at the history of it. Please send me coffee and biscuits. Great. I know exactly what they want now. But in all real honesty, they've already say, please send me more information. Please troubleshoot. Please ask the user to do this. We know it's a bug. Please refer to this URL. We know it's an issue. We're fixing it. Or we don't know what we're doing. Please help us. So whatever it is, it'll go in here. Now it's come back to the operations. So SLA has moved back to the operations team on the other side. They want a longer IntelliTrace file. I can zoom down here. And now my operations people can run a longer IntelliTrace search and allow the user or themselves to kick off that same thing and repeat the process. Now I can get a larger stack to look at from a support perspective as a developer. So now we're handing over this information between both parties. Everyone looks at the same source of truth. Everyone has the same view of what's going on. We can kind of bring that lead time down for repairing issues from a usage perspective. Again, what we do is we assign it into our process flow from a support perspective. SLA, change request, change board along the way. Ideally, from this alerts over here, I want this going back into my service desk, whatever service desk tool you use. Now I can track and see exactly who's working with what along the way. But similar to what I showed you in the first demo, everyone stays in the tools they know. Ops, stay in your consoles. Developers, stay within your tools that you use to develop. And let's trade off those components from a support perspective. Now we take it to, great, private cloud, awesome. Again, doesn't really matter. I mean, this can be looking at Azure infrastructure. Alerts can be coming in. Doesn't really matter what it's looking at. But maybe I haven't got any investment in System Center. Or I want to start using some of the new components within Microsoft Azure. So that new piece that I showed you in the link is down to this piece called Application Insights. If you want to do a simple test when you get back home, you click on New, go into my Developer Services, Application Insight piece comes up, and asks you a few simple questions. What do you want to do? What do you want to monitor? How should it look? Are you doing an app? Are you doing infrastructure? And it'll step you through that process. Once that process is done, you will have a small window you can use. Well, you have a few of them depending on when you kick in. I have a little quick start guide over here, just for a little zoom in for the guys at the back. That basically says to me, do you want us to help you set this up? What do you want to monitor? Let us help you with those processes. So yes, click on that. It goes, well, what are you doing? Are you adding code? So if you're a developer, awesome. You have control of the code. You can add the right pieces in so we can pull the information at the right time from that application to get insight into it. If you're not a developer, like myself, I mean, I wouldn't be trusted with code. I want to go to the bottom one over here, which says, please show me your infrastructure. Give me a view of what's going on at the low level. All that happens is you log into the server that you're going to be monitoring, go to the same location, download the status monitor, and run through the process of configuring it. And then we'll start to send the information back to Azure to give you an insight into the infrastructure and the services that are sitting on top of that from an application perspective. So now this obviously gives us more flexibility because we can push updates out quicker to our users that are using this. Whereas Ops Manager, when you get the updates, it's a roll-up, it's an update pack that's coming out, or it's the next one that's coming out. So ideally, I would highly encourage you to have a look at this from a usage perspective. What do I get out of this from an information perspective? So I just expand this for a second and jump in here. And this is kind of what we released, moved from private to public last week. I can now drill in as an operations person into all those categories over there. The one piece I'm very interested in is the users piece in the bottom left. I want real access control. I want my developers to see the same information, but just see it. I want my business to see the same information, but just see it. But my ops team, you can go in, you can interrogate, you can restart, you can do more around the infrastructure side. And this starts to pull out now rich information, rich insight into your application. On demand, ready to go. So I'd highly encourage you to play with this or test with this in your infrastructure environment. This is a key way forward for us around application insight. Not telling me my app's up or down or fast or slow. This line is taking so long to talk to this database. Alert. It shouldn't be 10 seconds. It should be a second. Alert me. Let me know. Either my app's slow, my server's slow, or my database is waiting for something, or it's slow. Now I can assign responsibility to fix the issue along the way. If I step out for a second from a usage perspective, so I close this, and I wanted to drill into my service piece over here. Now I can build and work in all my relevant alerting. So for most of you put your hands up for Ops Manager, you understand alerting, you understand thresholds. I can now tie exactly that same component into my infrastructure on premises or within Azure, depending on where this sits. Now I get true insight immediately back from a usage perspective. Now again, if I want to show something to my developer, well, he has the report. Go log into the portal, you've got access, go and see what I'm showing you is slow. It's not my SQL. My SQL is idling away. It's waiting for something. Developer can go and look at his code. Or my SQL is actually slow. It's creaking. I need to make a change to my infrastructure on the SQL side. IaaS or PaaS make those changes. Again, the simple truth over here is we're all looking at the same information along the way. And that's the key thing from the first kind of or second slide I showed you this morning. All three personas need to see the same information. You need to understand the same pieces, ensuring that we'll actually move through a proper cycle as quickly as possible along the way. This one slide kind of sums up the focus we have going forward. In the middle is investments that our developer division is making around TFS, VSO, the focus areas. On the bottom over here is the focus area from a IT Pro perspective, whether it be System Center, whether it be Office. Integration between Office and Visual Studio for planning. Integration between Office and System Center for infrastructure planning. We're starting to move very closely across all of these. All of a sudden, it becomes quite important to understand what the other people are doing. So if you do see a application performance monitoring or an application insights, I think it ran yesterday, if I stand corrected, I don't think it's today. There's an app insights session. It's very developer focused, but it's worthwhile understanding how we're approaching this from a development perspective. If you understand it from the other person or other persona's perspective in your business, you'll start to get more value along the way for this. Okay, so to kind of close off around the last few minutes, I'm not going to spend too much time on objectives and takeaways. I think it's quite simple. I just want to focus on this piece at the end. I don't know why it's bright purple. It wasn't meant to be. That's quite, so you might not see it at the back. But this piece is the takeaways you can start to use. And I'll leave this up for those that are at the back. Ideally, this is where we're starting to build in the training layer around the infrastructure, the management layer, and the process of how to talk to the relevant people along the way. So I hope this has given you kind of an intro to understand how important operations is within this DevOps movement, but also to give you a view of the interaction between business and developers, to have those conversations, to understand and to work quite closely with them to actually move through this as quickly as possible. Okay, that's all my content. I've got 4 minutes left. I'm quite tight. I'm here for going anywhere. So do you want to just come out here and have a chat? Go ask a question. Otherwise, come have a chat to me. Thank you very much for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week with Ignite. Okay, thank you.